Welcome to Turnkey's roundup of the SAP Insider US conference, just recently held in the Mirage Resort, Las Vegas. So, obviously, I'm sure you all wish you were there yourselves, but getting out there to Las Vegas is not often the greatest of business cases that people will want to send you to. But I'm sure, looking forward in Amsterdam, there will be more opportunities to go. So, the topic of the webinar today is really just to cover a few of the general themes from what happened in Vegas. I'm going to be telling you what I can tell you, but as we all know, what happens in Vegas normally stays in Vegas, but that's not often true for all of the conferences here. So, we'll cover what the event was like from what was there, the speaker sessions that myself and the team went to, and any kind of general themes that we had in and around that. As always, there are some new products to be announced at such events, and we'll finalise this with some of the overall general feelings of the conference, really. So I know from the attendee list that a number of you have attended these conferences, so there may be a little bit of revision here and a little bit of appetite whetting to see what you may expect in the Amsterdam leg of the conference tour. So, what was there? Well, I suppose for those of you that haven't been to these sorts of events, it's useful just to refresh what is available in this sort of event, nominated by, let me just mute everybody again. We'll just make sure that we don't get all of that kind of stuff. Good stuff. There we go. So, the event was a 4-day conference. It started with a jumpstart day, and those jumpstart days are normally for more detailed analysis into specific topics. So rather than just, say, an hour's worth of speaker-led sessions, it's more like a 3-hour session where you're expected to go further into depth. Alongside that, also then had a number of the hands-on labs. So that's where customers or consultants, for example, can get really hands-on with a particular SAP product. And there was a number of those that were led throughout the week as well. Throughout the conference, the SAP Solution Center was there to be able to answer specific questions if you had any particular SAP-centric questions. So we normally use those to raise issues that our customers have had and to feed those back to SAP. They're normally quite good to give SAP a bit of a kicking, to be honest, and get your long-standing issues out there. So certainly those of you that asked me to do so, we went and represented you on SAP Solution Center. So the main reason for going to these sorts of things are the speaker-led breakout sessions. Now those are where you get a nominated speaker who has got the hour to tell you about a particular subject. We try to make those as exciting as we possibly can, but we're also aware of the fact that sometimes we're working in the GRC area and not everybody shares the passion that we have for these sorts of things. But regardless, those speaker-led sessions are the main value add from an attendee's perspective. There are also a number of customer case studies as well. So this is where customers come up to the fore and start talking about their own GRC stories or their own particular areas of expertise, what they've done, how they've done it, and any learnings that they've had. Again, generally pull quite a crowd, and in this scenario, that was no different. There were a couple of exhibitor-led product sessions as well. So these are relatively new from an SAP Insider perspective, but these are effectively paid-for sessions that vendors can host. They can do it alongside a customer, or they can just use it as effectively a sales pitch to tell people how good their product is. Now, what was relatively new in this term was the facilitated discussion forums. So similar to a speaker session, but this was meant to be a more interactive and discussion-led session. So there wasn't necessarily a set prepared speech or prepared session. It was just facilitated by experts, and the idea was to get customers talking to each other. So I actually did one of those discussion forums. I facilitated it, was asked by SAP Insider to host one, and we co-hosted that with SAP as well. So I'll come on to that a little bit later. Then there are the usual exhibitor halls, where you can go around the vendor showcase, looking at all the weird and wonderful, wacky products that people have decided to put together and push out to the market. And finally, from a speaker's position, there were the keynotes and the usual spotlight sessions where we learn about new things to market, SAP roadmaps for where GRC is going within the SAP context as well. Finally, had to ask the experts as a formal session where customers can come to some of the speakers who have been speaking across the curriculum and ask any of their specific questions. And along the outside of the conference, there were many, many hosted social events going on as well. So if there was any time that you can do that, Vegas is it. I'm not going to go into them in this webinar today. There's far too many stories to tell, none of which can be particularly laid back to those at home. That's for attendees only. I'm sure you're disappointed to hear. So, themes from the sessions. Well, as you can see, there were 8 different tracks from a GRC interest. And now the GRC sessions were co-hosted with the finance ones. A lot of the times with the SAP Insider Conference, there's a patchwork quilt of different interest areas. But in this particular one, there was only GRC and finance. So there seemed to be a very deliberate act to ring-fence the audience to the office of the CFO, really. So by co-hosting the GRC tracks with the finance ones, and we didn't have any of the different areas to be either diluting the attendees or mixing and matching the content sets. So as you can see, the topics were quite wide-ranging, ranging from the strategic and the art of the possible areas of the GRC side of things, through the governance pictures, right down to some of the more detailed product-specific case studies around S4HANA and the different kind of ways to report and build on the analytics from there. Now, far and away, the main topic areas were still access control, SAP security, and process control from a GRC perspective. I must admit I was very disappointed in the number of sessions that went outside of that familiar trodden path. Now, although I did a fraud management one, and I'm repeating that in Amsterdam, there were only 2, maybe 3 other ones in the fraud management area. And although there was the appetite to try and put some more of that on the agenda, that was very, very minor in the wider scheme of things. So, from the actual themes, many sessions were very similar to years gone by. And there is an appetite to improve that, but quite a lot of the time it was still the same old challenges. And I'm not really sure about the cause of that, whether that's that people aren't prepared to stand up and talk about it, or whether the actual customer maturity hasn't necessarily progressed beyond the access management sphere of influence and the process control discussions. But certainly from what we saw in the sessions, there were the customer case studies that were still talking about the same challenges that they've had from previous years, such as managing to audit requirements, managing access security, and trying to move their role design forward to meet the business requirements for a security solution. There wasn't very much more about integrating into a wider risk management context or really trying to take the mantle on and pushing the boundaries of an integrated risk approach. That would include fraud, audit, and everyone talking the same sort of languages. Now, what was interesting this year was that there was a dedicated cybersecurity track. And so there was clearly a desire to have more cyber threat sessions on the agenda. However, in the reality, when we came to attend some of those sessions, they were very generic. So they were still talking about the potential threats and talking about external threats, the requirements for cybersecurity solutions, and things like script kiddies who are able to just get a how-to guide off the internet and start using that to target customers. There wasn't anything particularly detailed in terms of solutions and like a checklist of exactly what you have to do. There was nothing, in fact, that you couldn't have got from self-serving yourself on the internet, which was a bit of a disappointment. However, there is a cyber session that is scheduled as a separate conference later in the year. I believe it's around May. And so this was probably dropped into the GRC topic as an appetite whetter to say, if you're interested in this topic, there's another opportunity there throughout the rest of the year. The S4HANA security sessions, however, were very, very good. There's a lot more interest coming out from the market about what S4HANA means. Obviously, it's a watershed moment in terms of SAP publishing this new solution and asking their customers to come with them on that journey. And so there was a lot more granularity about what you need to know and what you can do from an SAP HANA and an S4HANA specific security scenario. So again, that that did provide some really useful context to the discussions as people are now moving towards that S4 journey. The other one that was quite interesting was the IAG hands-on lab. So you may be aware that there's a new-ish product from SAP in the access management space, which is the cloud offering for identity and access governance. There was a specific hands-on lab there, and that was maxed out pretty much the whole of the time they ran it. So very, very useful to see a lot of people interested in that particular product. It's still got time to mature. It's not there as a fully fledged scenario yet, so I'm not quite sure that it's ready to retain its critical mass. But certainly the interest was there to actually see it and understand what it does and how it does it. So I'll come on to that a little bit later. Now, I mentioned previously that there was a facilitated networking thread throughout the sessions and throughout the conference agenda. Now, those discussion forums that I said that I had to facilitate, they should be a really useful tool in getting customers to talk to each other. However, in my opinion, it really didn't work. So, as I said, I co-hosted one with Jan Gardner from SAP, and the topic was the 3 lines of defense. What we were trying to do is get people to talk about their experience of using 3 lines of defense, how they orchestrate 3 lines of defense, and what that means. But the positive side of it was that so many people turned up. That was really good, but it meant that the discussion was stifled. So you couldn't necessarily influence the discussions too strongly. Everybody kind of sat there expecting it to be a speaker-led session, and so didn't really want to volunteer their own information. So there was a little bit of a challenge in actually getting the discussion moving through. It became much more like a reverse Q&A with myself and Jan asking questions of the audience and trying desperately hard to get somebody to elaborate on that point rather than just to give like a one-word answer that says, yes, we use 3 lines of defense and what it is. So, again, I think there's work to be done. It's certainly not something that we would back away from doing in the future, but I think there needs to be a little bit of work to understand what that session is for. Maybe limit the attendees, restructure the room so it becomes a lot more collaborative, rather than it's everybody kind of looking there to the speaker to influence it hugely. Ask the experts. Now this, on the face of it, should be a massive win for customers, to have the opportunity of all of the implementers there in the same room, that they can ask the questions, seek out advice about some of their SAP concerns or implementation approaches, anything that you don't necessarily trust SAP to give you the honest answer about. This should be a really good hub for people to understand where they can go to get some of that advice. And again, very, very poor from the uptake and also from the promotion point of view. So throughout the course agenda, the conference agenda, there were 2 different RC expert sessions, and I was hanging around. I was delivering one of them as an expert myself, and I only saw 1 attendee come up across those 2 days who actually sought out that opportunity. Now again, maybe that's because it's scheduled just when the cocktail reception's going on and when the exhibitor hall is flowing freely, but it does seem that having those RC expert sessions is an opportunity missed by either SAP Insider or by customers themselves who aren't necessarily seeking out the answers to the questions that they came with. In contrast to that, the SAP Solution Center was very busy. So that is the point that you can get to some of the SAP solution management guys, some of the product management guys, and ask some of the questions on the tools. So as you can imagine, that is quite busy. It's via appointment only, but if you have got a burning question that you think only SAP can help you with, that is the place to go. And again, it shows that it's a very valuable addition to the conference schedule. Now, what we did find out is that, as with all of these things, trying to bring people together, trying to network with them and try and force that to happen is far more easily achieved if you've got it in an informal setting with a drink or 2. So those social settings in the evenings, the cocktail receptions, the different kind of wine tasting events and the beer tasting events that they put on as part of the conference allowed a lot more communication and direct networking to happen. So fair play to the SAP Insider. They are learning, they are evolving, they're trying their hardest, and I think for the most part they're getting there. They just need to tweak some of the formats a little bit further to get that going on. So, on to new products. So as we've seen in previous events, these events have served as being the watershed moment for a lot of different industry and technical product announcements. And I'm not sure there were too many brand new things that nobody had ever heard of before, but certainly there were some updates for some of the functionality that SAP are promoting and bringing out. So the main source of that is often the spotlight session. So you don't tend to get a great deal in the keynotes because that's meant to be forward-looking and general industrial themes. But certainly the SAP and the GRC spotlight talks about more on the SAP roadmap for things that are coming down the line or already in development. So again, Kevin McCollum chaired that as the global GRC solution management head, and he had Jochen Thierer as the global development lead, also doing a bit of a double team there. So some of the highlights from that really, the IAG product. So we've heard about this before. It's not brand new, but it was useful from a spotlight session to understand what SAP's roadmap is for that, and whether it's all in from a cloud point of view, or whether there is a complementary product from an on-premise approach there. And so quite rightly, Kevin did reiterate, as you can see from the quote here, that SAP will continue to innovate and invest in the core GRC products. So the main one being access control that IAG completes with. That does not mean to say that there is going to be one and one only product. Access control is still going to have a supported and an invested life within SAP, so there's no way that the IAG product comes and eats up all of the lunch of the access control suite. But that does mean to say that IAG will have a development path. So there will be additional functionality developed for IAG, accessed via a cloud offering that comes through SAP. Another product which is not necessarily new, but is very recent, is the SAP Tax Compliance. So this co-locates with the BPS and the fraud management software, but is designed specifically for organizations who struggle with calculating their tax returns and have a largely complicated manner of which to report that back. So this product is discrete and it's separate, but does allow that solution to roll it through. And again, it's one of those things that's been developed in-house by SAP for SAP, whilst then realizing that there's a market for it externally. So they productized it, sent it out to market, and it's one of those things that should come on stream very, very quickly. Another little secret that was divulged was the fact that there is a new GRC version in development. So they haven't quite worked out the name yet, whether it will follow the existing naming convention of GRC 11.0, or whether it will start referring itself in the same way that the HANA version releases are, and the S4 HANA side of things. So if it follows that, it will be GRC 18.05. So there'll be a new name, there'll be a new version, it will all do wondrous things, it'll have a lot of the S4 HANA user interface baked in as a matter of course, it will be deployed on HANA, and it will all answer all the questions for every single thing that the GRC's got to offer. But the complete scope of what that product will do and what it will look like is still yet to be defined. And because it is a roadmap session, all of that is subject to change. So SAP could absolutely change course and do something very different with it, but presently it's scheduled for release in 2018. So it does show that there's an evolution path for the GRC products. And finally, the other product that was launched, and I'm going to use this as a shameless promotion, is Turnkey's own Bedrock. So you may have been already up to speed with this, but we've now launched it with an official sub-brand, an official name that is Bedrock. And yes, we understand that there's a link to the Flintstones, but we wanted to absolutely have this as an identity for our managed service offering. So normally around the SAP GRC technology set, but it's wider than that. It's basically saying that you can access GRC capability and support for your GRC environments via a managed service. So it's changing the game from a consultancy to a managed service environment, really, where you can access all of the same functionality, all of the same expertise through an ongoing cost. So we've put some of the collateral together that understands exactly what that says. I'm not going to go through it now because this isn't meant to be a sales pitch session, but just so you know that it's out there, it goes all the way from a managed, fully hosted, licensed SAP GRC portfolio hosted in the cloud with Turnkey, or we can take on any of the sort of the process outsourcing or just the consultancy experiences that we have. But what we're really saying with that is you can access anything that Turnkey does from an expertise perspective, from a consulting services expertise perspective, and you can do that rather than on a CapEx budget, you can do it on an operational spend. But if you want to know anything more than that, then I would absolutely love to speak to you, possibly not in the webinar context. So, overall conclusions. General footfall is a really good way to understand how successful the conference is. And for those of you that attended, you may have detected a bit of a downward trend in that. That seemed to have been reversed in this conference. So it was really pleasing from an exhibitor point of view to see far more customers, far more people on the ground attending these sessions. So there were still a lot of consultancies, there were a lot of vendors there, but there were far higher customers than we had detected in previous conferences. And I think having the financials and the GRC elements co-hosted, although it felt like that meant that the conference was a little bit smaller, it actually had a positive effect because most of the people there were having some sort of similar objective out of the end of it. There wasn't that kind of disparate, I'm just here to learn about HANA, or I need to understand what the HR legal change patches are, for example. There were people who were interested in the finance area and the financial risk and the GRC bit all together. So I think it did kind of work having that alignment there between the two different product sets and the two different capabilities. Overall, breakout sessions were very, very well attended, and a special note out to one of our analysts there who actually did a session to a packed room. There were at least 60 people in that session, and all of them were very actively engaged. There were a lot of active debates going on in those speaker sessions. Certainly one of the custom ones from Bosch actually almost ended up in a consultant v consultant argument about what's the best way to do security. Again, more on that in future webinars, no doubt. But it was very useful to see that people were engaged with the topics that they were attending rather than just sitting back and hoping for some tidbits or a checklist for implementation. As I mentioned, Cyber Session appears for the first time, showing that their content is evolving and whetting the appetite for the dedicated cyber event later in the year. It does show that, again, although people are still often focused on the access control and the process control modules, there is more out there, and people are starting to wake up for that. Again, probably a positive from a customer point of view, certainly a negative from us, was the exhibitor hall seemed quite small in comparison to previous years. So there was much more of a focus on the customer experience, much more focus on the sessions and the curriculum that was available, rather than having a massive, great big exhibitor hall with every vendor under the sun trying to kind of push their particular wares. Certainly we took a different approach in our exhibition. Rather than going for a flagship giveaway where we were giving thousands and thousands of pounds worth of freebies, we went there just to have the conversations. And certainly that did result in, I think, a much better experience for all parties, really. We didn't get as many people scanned or tagged on the customer contact list, but what we did get was far higher in quality, and the conversations that we had, I certainly feel, were a lot more valuable because we could dedicate more time to actually talking with customers in a more collaborative manner. So much better from that side of things. Doesn't mean to say that we're not going to give away something fantastic in Amsterdam, but it certainly from an exhibitor point of view was very different there. And what we tend to use it for is to integrate our global teams and to get more cohesion with some of the SAP guys that we wouldn't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis. And once again, that was great from a conference. You can get most of the SAP guys that you may need to talk to in the same, at least venue, if not the same room, and you can seek some of those answers in a much quicker manner than you could using SAP customer messages and waiting for the mandatory 2 weeks worth of response time. So again, great to actually be able to be there to catch up with old relationships, meet new people, and see what the industry is doing. So from all of those particular boxes, I think it was a success. Again, just the final point, one of the things that we did say that we would do to our own team is allow anyone who wanted to the opportunity to go out there. And one of our graduates did absolutely take that by the by the scruff of the neck, went out there for the first time and delivered a fantastic session on process control master data. So well done, Joanna, for stepping in. It's hard to do. A lot of people struggle with public speaking, don't feel it particularly comfortable, but I want to publicly say in this forum, she did a great job, and we look forward to more and more of our team stepping up there and doing what we do best, which is helping customers to understand what we understand and do a good job on their sites. So just to wrap up, Las Vegas conference was all well and good. The Las Vegas conference is gone now. So we are looking forward to June on the 14th to the 16th, and that is going to be in Amsterdam. If you haven't already got your tickets, then please reach out, get in contact, because we may well be able to source you a discount entry. And if I've whet the appetite enough that says that you may well want to attend that, then please feel free to get in touch. Otherwise, I'm sure I'll speak to most of you in a different context, but thank you very much for joining this webinar. I hope it's been useful, and if you have any further questions, then feel free to reach out to anyone of the Turnkey team. I'm sure we'll be able to help.